Good afternoon.
Kia ora. Good afternoon, Mayor, Councillors. My name is Diana Shand. I live just across the road from the Arts Centre, been there since the beginning of the 1980s, and I am most apologetic that despite my long personal experience in local government, I have not managed to put up a slide for you to look at. However, I do have some extra copies from the 5 copies that I supplied to the staff, if you would like to pass these along. Right.
Have you got that on an email copy?
Not yet.
Right, but when you have, just email it through and they'll put it on the hub for all of us. Thank you.
Actually, I am going to have to retrieve one of those. So I can actually look at it myself. I do apologise. Okay, I know that you've read my submission, so you know that I'm very much for public transport. I am actually concerned that we do have a fuel tax, which will actually reduce rates and serve to increase public transport. I actually support a number of things that are in the long-term plan, but I'd like to focus in this 5 minutes on the heritage area, which is just across the street from you. And I have been a member of ICON since the beginning. It was formed at the beginning of the 1980s because of deep concern people had then that a very precious area of public and private buildings and architecture were being lost to what was called then specified departures. And in the planning documents since, this area has had special provisions that has actually predicted it. And it has continued through the district plans to try and protect this particular area, which is actually set, if you go from Beeley Avenue south to Cambridge South, from Beeley Avenue to south to Cambridge Terrace, it's bounded by Victoria and Durham Street and the Avon River to the east, and Ralston Avenue and Park Terrace to the west. Now, it has been acknowledged by many people, including leading heritage experts, that this area contains quite extraordinary examples of residential domestic architecture as well as public buildings, public architecture. And the build characteristics come from the Victorian and Edwardian architectural elements in those residential buildings, and an identification of social and cultural history in the surroundings. And as I say, these have been acknowledged in the past. Now, I would just note that I was delegated by ICON, the Inner City West Neighbourhood Association, ICON, which was formed in the 1980s, as I mentioned, to submit on the Christchurch Replacement District Plan, outlining provisions to retain and manage the character and heritage areas of the residential area in the vicinity of the Arts Centre and surroundings. And we actually, we had a glitch there because the area has been decimated by earthquakes. People were very shaken, and the person within ICON delegated to make a submission in the original plan misunderstood the complexity of the plan and what was required, and on technical details, the submission, which I was then called to put forward later, didn't hold because we hadn't made that original submission with the technical details of exactly where rules might be changed or the area might be covered. It was a very general submission. And so, although there was a great sympathy from the City Council representation there and the staff, knowing the value of the area and the expert witnesses that happened to be around, and there still is great sympathy in the Heritage Unit for the value of this area, it has not been adequately protected. And consequently, I'd really like you to consider incentives and support for what we were proposing then, which you would have to do by a plan change, and I'd like to see the city really consider a plan change to be led by the city to retain this very important area. And I have actually put in a map of the area, see buildings clustered around Gloucester Street, north and south, Worcester Street. The Arts Centre is obviously included, comes down as far as the north side of Cashel Street with just a few buildings on the south side. And I would really recommend that you consider that, and incentives of support that can sustain the interim period until a plan change can be achieved. And those incentives and support could include advice and promotion of heritage, especially domestic architecture and heritage and character areas, funding to support heritage retention. I think this is really, really important, and I have already mentioned that in the city plan in the submission I made. Waiving or refund of resource consent charges, as it's done in other cities, design guidelines, and active encouragement and engagement for heritage. And finally, the council-led plan change to achieve what we call then a central city west character area with heritage encompassing a heritage character area. And I've actually listed in the submission some of the ways that this could be achieved. I might say that in the attempts to actually come in rather late in the plan, as I've mentioned when I was called in, I did go around and talk to a number of landowners and got quite an amazing amount of sympathy from people who are in buildings that are in the process of being earthquake repaired or could be bowled over and replaced with new buildings. Even speaking to some of the Clifford family, who actually are very sympathetic and own still quite a lot within the area. I think that, you know, we need to draw in Christ College and we need to draw in other people, but I did really get this, I felt really excellent support from some people that this, from landowners, that this could be something that if it was really, you know, pulling the City Council and the leadership pulled together and indicated strong support for doing this sort of thing, we could retain this area, which is the first port of call for so many visitors to the city. It is, and you pass this pathetic little sign, cultural area, and there's no interpretation to explain why it's a cultural area.
Diana, we have a number of challenges with our district plan capacity to make changes to it, as you know. And I'm also going to suggest that you have this conversation with Regenerate Christchurch, because there is a regeneration planning process that is available to the city at the moment, which may in fact encompass what you're proposing in a far more engaged way than a RMA process, which would involve appeals and various other things. So look, thank you very much for your submission. I know that there's a lot of support around the table for what you're talking about, so we'll have a good look at that. If you could email through the additional information, that would be great.
And thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm sure you'll do what you can within the process.
Yes,
thank you.
There are limitations. Thank you. Okay, so we're now adjourned until 1:30. That would be great. So.